Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue a 1930s series of horror films. This one, 1932's The Mummy. For those counting at home, this is mainline episode 315. This episode is a special event because we're also celebrating the one-year anniversary of the creation of our good friends, the monster movie Happy Hour. And so with us tonight... Yeah, and we've actually brought we've brought cocktails in their honor. With us tonight are 2/3 of the monster movie Happy Hour, historian, raconteur, and cocktail wizard Scott Chesebrough. Say hello, Scott.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
And artist, and I feel like there should be more there, but artist David Geister. Hello.
Hello.
You could go into all the kinds of art that he does. It seems like it's about 8. I've counted like 5 at least.
Yes. No, absolutely. And we were bragging about you to our daughter about, how you do like dioramas for museums and stuff.
I was saying I never knew that was an actual job, and I'm like, this is the coolest job.
Well, I never said that was well-paying work, though.
From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man. Currently from Comixology, he's a Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
And tonight I shall be known as Ardith Bay.
Ardith Bay. Wonderful. And finally in Denver, as always, color commentary. You've been with this show for like 10 years, so I can't... I mean, at what points?
No,
it seems like you're an expert.
It's always color commentary.
Color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, and happy anniversary to these lovely gentlemen. I'm sorry that we are missing your third part, Mary Toller, who is lovely and wonderful, and I was looking forward to not having to represent all of women, but oh well. And I do have my Rummy Mummy cocktail in your honor. So
and Mary was actually the one who sent the recipe for the Rummy Mummy, which we have. And fair warning to Joya, this is basically just nothing but rum. It's basically just.
I know. I'm sure my commentary will get more and more colorful as the evening progresses.
Mary is notorious for her very strong cocktails.
Yeah.
So
all right.
I am unsurprised to hear that it's mostly rum.
It's mostly rum with some vanilla vodka.
Yes.
So anyway, all right. The Mummy.
Water it down.
Yeah, the Mummy is a 1932 American pre-code horror film directed by Carl Freund. The screenplay was by John Balderston from a story by Nina Wilcox Putnam and Richard Shaver. It was released by Universal Studios. We know this because if you're a big Universal fan, if you have the lunchbox, the Mummy is always there, like Dracula and Frankenstein, And the film stars Boris Karloff, Zita Johann, David Manners, Edward Van Sloan, Van Helsing himself, and Arthur Byron. It is about an ancient Egyptian mummy named Imhotep, who is discovered by a team of archaeologists and inadvertently brought back to life through a magic scroll. And then he goes undercover as a modern Egyptian to try to bring back his lost love. And that is a twist that I did not see coming. Yes. But I mean, that was pretty darn cool. So let's get some opening thoughts. Let's do it this way. We're going to go Drew, because he's the Universal guy. He can give us some context. Julia, Scott, Tony, David, and then we'll go into the topics. So Drew, put this into context for me. I know, like, where does this sit after Frankenstein and Dracula? We still have the music opens up at Swan Lake, which firmly places this as an early Universal horror. But make sense of all of this for me.
Well, this was a bit of a branch out in some ways for Universal. This was one of their first attempts to do something that was not based on any literary sources. It was more rooted in the fact that the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb was all the rage in the news about 10 years prior. And that was kind of the genesis of where this all came from. This has a lot of roots in Dracula, which is, you can tell by the story structure, some of the cast members, and the fact that Carl Freund, who was the cinematographer of Dracula, is the director of this movie. Although in some ways I would say this movie is superior to Dracula, and not in every way, but in some ways. Karloff was, had become a sensation because of Frankenstein. So this was their way of bolstering him from being just a regular movie star to being a superstar. In fact, it's noted that this is the first movie poster to ever have a star just as his last name, Karloff. I think this is an interesting movie in terms of horror history. Outside of the fact that it helped popularize the idea of a resurrected mummy as a, stock horror concept. Although it's very different than a lot of the mummy movies that came after it, even the ones by Universal. But you also have the whole concept of the reincarnated lover, which somehow got co-opted by vampire movies after this movie. Like you see a lot of Dracula movies and vampire movies stealing this idea and running with it. I think this is an interesting film, not just because it's a fun and entertaining, monster movie and a good example of the Universal style, but it's also kind of a time capsule in both good ways and bad ways. There's a lot of beautiful 1930s clothing in this. But there's also, of course, a lot of colonialism. There's a lot of casual racism. So as like a 21st century topic starter, this is a good conversation starter in ways that maybe Frankenstein and Dracula are not. I also think it's very strange that this is actually the only second mummy movie we've done. We've somehow only done Bubba Hotep, and now we're doing this. So even though I don't know how a horror movie podcast with over 300 episodes has somehow avoided the subject of mummies as much as we have, and yet here we are. But there's plenty of other things that I could go into, but I think I'll save it as we come into, because there's a lot of interesting trivia behind this movie. But
Good.
I really am glad to be talking about this, of course, in the month of October, just in time for Halloween, to talk about one of the iconic movie monsters. We couldn't be doing this better with our good friends here. This is going to be a good discussion.
Excellent. Julia, I presume you had never seen The Mummy. So what are your thoughts?
So yes, I had not seen it. I agree with Drew on the casual racism, and I believe there's even blackface, possibly, because it seems like the slave is just made up.
That is not a guy in blackface. That's Noble Johnson, who actually was one of the first black movie producers.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if they just made somebody up or what, because I didn't know if they were actually hiring people of color back then. That's good too.
Legitimately African American.
At least they hired a black person of color to play the unfortunate character. But yes, no, it's quite a remarkable film. It's really beautiful to look at. I feel like I say that every time we talk about these older films. It is some of the effects are just extraordinary, like the transformative effects and that kind of thing. I think it's really noteworthy that it's called The Mummy, and yet we only ever see him as the mummy for a few seconds, and then after that he's not. So it's not what you picture. It's not this person in mummy wrappings wandering around the whole film. He's actually disguised himself, because most of the film takes place a few years after. How many? 10 years after The Mummy is
10 or 11 years
released. But it's inspired by the discovery of King Tut's tomb, of Pharaoh Tutankhamun's tomb, and the screenwriter had been present at the opening of the sarcophagus, and he was like, I want to do something like that. So that's why it's not based, like Drew was saying, on a fictional work. It's rather on real life stuff that was going on. But it's really, the performances are fantastic. I was mesmerized by Zita Johann, or however you pronounce her name. She was apparently had a terrible relationship with the director. That was not, it was very uncomfortable for both of them, I guess. But yeah, she was really interesting looking, and I liked her performance. I thought it was very, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to talking about some more.
Very good. Scott, welcome.
Thank you
again to the Castle of Horror. And so I don't know if you've watched The Mummy a lot or not much at all, but what are your opening thoughts?
I've seen it several times over the 6 decades of my life. So, and I'd have to say that this was, as a teenager, probably in my early teens, the very first time I saw this movie, it was a great disappointment. It was a great disappointment for just what was said a few minutes ago, in that Karloff is only a mummy, as one classically thinks of a mummy, for maybe 3 minutes, if that. And the rest of it is sort of almost a stage play production. It's, almost all of the action could be done in a play format. And so I found it really, as a teenager, dry and not all that interesting, aside from that first clip. But now, for the reasons enumerated before, I find it a very interesting film, and with good performances all around. But as already mentioned, also really puts the foibles of the time on display in the casual racism and the colonialism. But I think it's a very worthwhile film. I did have one question come to mind, though. I find the concept of a resurrected mummy, the mummy resurrects and then tries to blend in with society, at least as a pretext to get what it wants to get to achieve its ultimate goals. I don't think that has been done in any other film that I'm aware of. The movie with Brendan Fraser, The Mummy resurrects and becomes, at least takes a human appearance, step by step, and that's part of the film. But I don't think any other film has done what was done in this film, and maybe that's because you'd have to get the rights to do that. I don't know. But
I don't know. No,
I found it very interesting.
It wouldn't be, because ideas aren't copyrighted. You could do it. You're right. I mean, this seems like a vestigial plot idea that has not been picked up over and over. And that is
think Anne Rice's Mummy novel is probably a little like that. I've never actually read it.
It's got more of that, yeah.
Well, and there were little nuances in the film that Karloff's character, Adith Bey, he says at one point that he doesn't like to be touched.
Yeah.
And it's clear from the makeup that they show often that he's supposed to be, less than supple.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's done to great effect. And I really think that this concept would make for a really interesting contemporary take on this, resurrected mummy.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Folks think that the close-ups are of a wood mask or whatever, as opposed to makeup, but I don't know. I think it looks pretty authentic. But anyway, it's good effect, whatever it is.
Tony, what are your thoughts?
So I saw this first, I think, when I was really young, but each time I viewed it subsequently, I forget that it's as slow as it is, which is not a knock, but I know a lot of people, when they see it, expect kind of a different take on it. And I think a lot of what people remember, if they've seen some of the other Universal Mummy movies, I think more people remember those because there's more kind of mummy action or whatever,
Right.
And so I think a lot of times when people revisit this one, they might be misremembering, or have seen clips of some of the other ones and go, oh, and they're a little bit disappointed because there's so much less, such an iconic image when you see him in the sarcophagus, and it looks amazing, and his makeup is great as Ardith Bey. But I think a lot of people's disappointment is because they've seen either, when we were growing up, either stills from other movies or have seen more clips of the other movies and kind of imprint upon that. I still think it's great. It's got some just amazing costumes. I'm surprised there's not more t-shirts of him when he's staring into the camera and has the underlit face, and his eyes are glowing. Like, it's such a great image. They really just outdid themselves with that. There's some other stuff I want to get into later, but I enjoy it, but I also have known a lot of people who dislike how slow it is and kind of the stage play nature, Scott was going into, in amongst, again, watching it in context now, and the colonialism, as a whole is clearly on display. Now, I also liked it because as a kid, there was a nonfiction, biography of basically the whole Tutankhamun discovery, and they went into a little bit of the curse, and of course, as a kid watching In Search Of and stuff like that, you want to believe more in the curse, but they actually try to debunk some of it, but also slightly go into but this was weird too, and this was also like, this isn't a curse, but this is very strange of what happened to everybody. And I reread that book I don't even know how many times.
Which book are you talking about, Tony?
The name escapes me because I left it at my parents' house. I'll dig it. I'll look again and see if I can find out exactly which one it is, or I'll have my parents look and see if it's still on their bookshelves. But we got it through some book club. It was that and like all these nonfiction books. So like I had one on like beekeeping, and I reread that a lot. I don't know. It was, but I was fascinated by like Egyptology stuff, and but also when you read it, you realize how terrible these archaeologists are in this movie. Like, hey, let's open a thing and just rip it apart. Are they going to dust it? Oh no, we're just going to sweep it away. Like
the archaeological procedures in this movie. Like, I'm sure people watching it now in 2020 would be horrified at the way they were handling things.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I cringed. Like I felt myself just tensing up watching them go, ooh, a ribbon. Let's rip that off. Let's spread the scroll out. Like, we don't care. Like, rip that. Oh, that's this wood. Rip it up. Throw that around. We're good. Like, it was painful. And that's not even my profession, but I know enough to know that's, dear Lord, let's not do that, But I dig it, but I understand why people would be disappointed. You may not think that you're in for such a kind of slow movie, but if you're in it for the atmosphere, I mean, I think that's with most of the Universal stuff from here, right? Like, even if it's slow, if you want to see atmosphere, Universal had that nailed, regardless of how good provincially the movie was. You're going to see some amazing black and white imagery, no matter what.
David, I know that it's difficult coming after all that, but still, opening thoughts anywhere you want to go.
You know what? There's not a damn thing I can say that hasn't already been said. Other than, as we all do, we view these movies, certainly at this point in our lives, through this lens of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it will always hold a particular place in my heart. But I have to confess, as Scott's said, as a kid, this was the disappointing mummy movie for me because of the lack of a mummy.
Right.
But as I have gotten older, I appreciate it more and more and more and more, largely because there's an elegance to it. It's so understated for the most part, I think. But I will always, there will always be that little 10-year-old inside me thinking, I want more of the mummy. I want more of the mummy, because I love that opening bit where I think the character's name is it Ralph? Ralph Norton is the guy who is, translating, and we see the mummy's hand come into the frame. Yes. And that to me is just absolutely beautiful. It really is the power of suggestion.
Yeah. I
certainly appreciate it more now than I did as a kid.
And the fantastic laugh, his reaction.
Yeah.
It's so good. Yes. I've never heard a laugh quite like that. It was
that's tenuous hold on sanity as well.
Yes.
That's something I wish would happen in horror films more, is that when someone sees something supernatural, that they would just lose their shit. Like, too often in modern horror films, people are a little too blasé looking at something that would be impossible. If you saw a mummy suddenly spring up and start moving around, you would freak the fuck out.
And then his reaction is, he went on a little walk.
Yes.
It's so funny.
Well, it definitely plugs back into. I think you'd be hard pressed if you ask Raimi from Evil Dead 2, the reading of the script that becomes the reading of the Necronomicon, and then when Ash starts laughing and just freaks out and he's uncontrollably laughing, I can't imagine this not being part of the influence for that.
I bet it is. Yeah, without a doubt. And the other thing, of course, this movie will always do to me is it will trigger that childhood memory of purchasing the Aurora model kit with the glow in the dark head.
Oh yeah.
Which, of course, I realize now was really inspired more by the Mummy created for the sequels.
Yes. Right.
With amazing cover art by, I think, James Bama did those paintings for those Aurora model kits then. God, that stuff was good.
Oh, man, it's beautiful.
But you know what? In fact, I want to rush out and buy one right now. So if you guys don't mind.
What's weird, you talk about the sequels. So what's weird is it took a long time for them to do another Mummy movie.
Is that so?
Yeah, it wasn't until the 40s. And when they did,
it's like 8 years, isn't it?
They never capitalized on the Imhotep character again. It was a different mummy named Caris.
Yeah.
And they never did another thing with the Imhotep character until the Stephen Sommers remake in the 90s. It's weird because to me, we're talking about like the idea of like, wanting to see like the cliche, juggernaut mummy that's like, slow moving.
Yeah, bursting through skylights and all that stuff.
Like the Hammer mummy is really,
the Christopher Lee mummy.
Really, is really a good example of that. But to me, this in Imhotep, and this to me is a lot scarier because he uses his mind. He's very devious, and he's got these sort of magical powers, which I think is a little more frightening as an adult. As a kid, I get everything you're saying. Wanted that.
Scott said, I mean, I reached a point actually fairly early in my adult life when I began to appreciate these movies in a completely different way. But it is kind of fun to place this movie in a timeline with then say obviously the sequels, but the Hammer Mummy, which I absolutely love, I really do, and then the Summers, was that 1990, the one with Brandon Fraser?
I don't know. In the 90s.
I don't remember the year.
90s.
I think 1998 or.
Oh, is it that late?
But isn't it interesting to just see how the action movie aspect just gets ramped up? So you start with this movie where things are slow and stately, and with the exception of a few, pieces of certain performances, everything's pretty understated. And then you get to Hammer, which will always be a deep love of mine. And then you get to the 1999, and trust me, I liked that movie too with Brandon Fraser. I mean, I really truly did, but for completely different reasons. So I think you can have all three of them and enjoy them equally. They all fulfill.
Except the only mummy that we should disavow is the Tom Cruise mummy.
I haven't seen it, so I don't even know.
I haven't seen it either.
We disavowed it by not watching it.
Virtual hand if you've seen it.
It's not my favorite movie. There is one sequence I really enjoy, and because most people haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil that. But there was one sequence that actually was something I'd never seen before in this, and I thought it was done really well. But that isn't, to me, in spite of the rest of the movie, unfortunately.
So for me, the funny thing is, it's very possible this is the first time I've ever seen this movie. And because I remember I was aware of certain plot points because when I was a kid, you never know when the Mummy is going to come on TV. But there was this book that I would take out of the library by Ian Thorne called The Mummy. And it was part of this series. They had one on Frankenstein and one on Dracula and so forth. There were like 13 volumes in these slim little hardback books aimed at kids. And they would tell the story of Universal horror movies and then like catch you up to like what else had been going on, like with Dracula or whatever. And, and if you saw them, you probably would recognize them. I mean, because they were in every library, certainly in the 80s, and So I was aware of this whole story of Imhotep and his eternal love. What strikes me, and you can't remove the fact that of course it's written by the writer of Dracula, but the whole thing of the mummy just waking up and then rocking on, putting on a normal modern Egyptian suit and doing his devious stuff. This is like a vampire movie. It really is.
Yep.
He's it's almost like a remake of Dracula in many ways, slightly better because they work a couple of kinks out. But I would say the similarities with Dracula are astonishing. How both of those movies start in a very exotic location and have really the most memorable bits that people will take screenshots of. And then they go to this sort of suspense drama of wills that as Scott said could play out in somebody's drawing room. And with this immortal lover, and he's going after the girl, and David Manners also wants the girl, and yada yada. It plays like a vampire movie. That's just and that's what's so strange. But to Scott's point, it's shocking to me that nobody's picked up on that sense. Because wouldn't it make sense? I mean, you could imagine a very like Fives Egypt heavy miniseries about a reincarnated mummy, doing his devious stuff and trying to arrange things. So all right. So one thing I thought, where should we go? I want to talk a little bit about the look of the film. As we mentioned, there's a drawing room aspect, but the fact that they're in cars and they're in balls and it's a very contemporary. That's what strikes me is it's 1932 and everybody's wearing very new clothing and these are a bunch of 1930s guys hanging out in Egypt. And to David's point, it's weird. If you take away the nostalgia, if you imagine that you're a person who just got off work and you go grab your girlfriend and you go to the movies, it's 1932. These characters are modern characters. These are like people living this exciting life, halfway around the world. Yeah. I don't know what my question is there, but that's all right. We should probably work our way through, I think, the plot and then hit on any topics that might come up. So as we mentioned, I don't think we need to go over this again. The movie begins in that exotic locale.
And you should mention that it begins with the same music, that the Swan Lake music that Dracula
It begins with Swan Lake. And so I really believed that there would be like no music in this entire film. And then later I was proven to be completely wrong because there's a lot of music.
This is a little more contemporary than Dracula. They had started to put music into, both Dracula and Frankenstein have no music outside of their opening and ending credits, whereas this,
whenever he's working his mojo on people, Ardith Bay, he has this, basically, to be honest, he's almost too powerful. He's an extremely powerful bad guy because he can work mojo at a distance. He can give you a heart attack. He can do all kinds of Darth Vader-y kind of stuff. Yeah. And but whenever he's doing it, they have this music that plays.
Although I find it interesting, again, the contrast between him and later mummy movies is that one gets the sense that as a mummy, because even when he's trying to blend in with normal people, like he doesn't look quite normal. Like he's got this wrinkled skin. I've always kind of imagined that while he has all these powers, he might be kind of physically frail. Like it's never implicitly stated. The closest thing is like I dislike being touched, but I kind of wonder if you put too much weight on him, if he might just shatter because he's a mummy.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but please continue. I had a thought.
No, go for it.
You got to jump in there, or else I'll just keep talking. So just.
I love the sound of your voice. Please keep going.
Thank you.
No, I was just thinking, but then he kills the museum guard, but we never actually see what he does to the museum guard, which the more I think about it now is even more horrifying. My first thought was, well, he crushes his throat with his hands. Like maybe he did something else. We never see it.
Doesn't when they're viewing the body later, doesn't the police inspector say something to the effect of he died of natural causes?
Yeah, he's not. He may be physically frail, but he's got badass Darth Vader figure where he can like give people heart attacks from across many miles.
And the one thing about Karloff's portrayal in this is that even in scenes where he's not being overtly menacing, like early on in the film when he's helping the guys find the tomb, he's just menacing just by being, normal for him. Just his presence is menacing.
No, that's true, and that's actually where we should pick up the plot. In fact, is 11 years after these archaeologists discovered this tomb of Imhotep and managed to lose the mummy in the process.
Before we get away from the mummy resurrection, there's something I want to point out.
Okay,
that the mummy makeup, the full mummy makeup that we've been talking about, like which is what you think of when you think of the mummy. That Karloff called that one of the worst, getting put in that makeup, one of the worst experiences of his entire life, because it took 8 hours to put him into it, and it took 4 hours to get out of it. And allegedly, when they were trying to take it off of it, it actually pulled off pieces of his skin.
Good Lord.
Yeah, that's astonishing.
Suffering for
and he
your
couldn't
art.
he couldn't really move his face. So that's part of why he looks so odd.
I'm sure
there's a great quote of which when his first time looking at himself in the entire mirror, he apparently said to Jack Pierce, well, you've done a wonderful job, but you forgot to put in a fly.
Right.
So that moment is the one that gets played in clip shows when the mummy comes to life, and as we mentioned, he his hand comes into the frame. I mean, so I saw that 1,000 times as a kid. It's astonishing. It's weird to me that I never watched this movie. I can't understand that at all. The gaps in my education are really strange. But 11 years go by, and our archaeologists, there's some political business where that comes afterwards. It comes after this find. A gentleman named Ardith Bey, who we understand immediately with no mystery whatsoever. Ardith Bey is Imhotep, who literally just, as the guy said, went out for a walk, I guess, wandered around, learned English, got a suit, got a job. Yeah. He seems to be I don't even know what he is. He seems to be a sort of statesman museum guy.
Well, he's an antiquities trader.
Antiquities trader. Hilarious. He's probably, so that's
like
cool.
Duncan MacLeod.
That is just so cool. Yes. Duncan MacLeod, the Highlander, just in case anybody doesn't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Duncan MacLeod is, then you're not going to get the reference anyway, so it's not even worth it.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So he shows up and he says, I think if you dig over there with because I supposedly found this clue, if you dig over there, I think you'll find a really cool tomb of a princess. So go check that out. And everybody's like, oh, thanks, mister. And his whole purpose, of course, because he's devious and controlling, is he's arranging for the mummy of his lost love to be uncovered, because this is all his big reunite with my past love plan. Although it gets complicated later because she's been reincarnated already. So what's interesting is that there's another jump after that. And then after that point, most of the exotic, cool action takes place around a museum, which I think is maybe just a much more manageable.
Starting with what you just said about the reincarnation, that he's calling her, trying to get her to come back from her mummy state, and instead he calls the reincarnated woman who comes to, kind of in a trance, comes to the museum and tries to get in because she just needs to.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
She's not able to, and then she passes out and she's missing the time. So she clearly, not.
I gotta say, that's a beautiful scene. This woman, Helen Grossner, is the character played by Zita Johann, and she's very interesting looking. She has this really great square jaw and gigantic eyes, and her whole storyline of being sort of periodically possessed by this previous life because of this spell that this wizard is casting. All of this is great. I mean, I loved all of that stuff. Again, maybe it would have been boring if I'd watched it when I was 8, but it's now. I mean, I just thought it was fantastic.
Mhm.
I'm amazed that you guys watched anything from the 1930s when you were young. That's a hard thing to get a little kid to do.
Okay, let's think about that.
I watched a lot of movies from the 1930s.
I think
You're very
forget-
unusual.
Well,
I think we forget that there's nothing else. You often had 3 channels and maybe more if you had UHF.
and
Yeah,
for
but
some
I'm
of
going
us,
to go out on a limb and say that you guys are unusual of kids who watch, because the rest of us, myself included, would watch anything else other than the 1930s.
I mean, again, I'm not saying that that's not also true, because I've been on the weirdo side of things for a long time.
I have to say that.
Yeah. What were you saying, Scott?
I was going to say, I'd have to say that, to a large degree, I think it's a function of age too. I think the older you are, the more prone you are to have done that. Not that
maybe,
younger
but I'm
people
older
don't.
than Drew is, and I definitely did not watch anything from the 1930s.
But I can remember, just as a very brief aside, I can remember when I was trying to get my daughter to watch older films.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I would occasionally even show her films from the 50s, that were black and white. And I can remember her, to my great disgust, one time saying to me, "Why are you trying to make me watch these black and white films? Black and white films are boring."
Wow.
Now, fortunately, I got her to realize that's not the case through education, and she's fine watching black and white films now. But at the time,
what I'm
I was
telling you, and Scott is, like I said, well, I didn't say it to you. I'm sorry. I said it I was thinking I said it last night, but I said it when we were talking to Incher. I just now in the last decade have discovered that black and white films are not boring.
Yeah, well,
so that's not a kid thing.
You're not alone.
Well, my daughter is not a kid anymore. She's like, what, 36 or something like that. So yeah.
I also think what Tony said is accurate. Like a lot depends on what you have going on. Whereas, like, Tony and I both grew up in rural communities where there was less options to do things. So, like, you would kind of take your entertainment choices where they were.
And also, even if it was like one of my favorite things growing up was Matinee at the Bijou, which was on PBS.
Wow, thank you for mentioning that.
And they often showed black and white films that at the time I would think was kind of boring. Like, because they had kind of a wide variety of subjects and films they would show. Some I would be really into, and I always kind of hoped it was going to be something more like The Mummy. Now, also before that, they had shown some, the whole thing was they would pair it with a serial. So you got this action serial, and then you got this movie that may or may not be boring to a kid.
Yes.
As an adult, I'd love to see a bunch of those. So it wasn't just, it might have been, hey, these black and white movies are boring, but they weren't if they were covering monsters. If you like monsters. So that was kind of different. Also, I think part of what Scott's talking about is each decade you're further and further removed. So you may, at the time, a black and white film may have been in my parents' childhood, but now you're talking generations later of when you've got an extra 2 decades or 3 decades or more worth of movies that you could watch. Yeah. Then why would you go back if the 80s are old movies to you? You may or may not want to go back to, in this case, a black and white film, even just pre-Wizard of Oz, may as well be a silent film.
Yeah.
by that stretch. And so I get it. Now I am also disappointed sometimes. I've had discussions with coworkers, and they told me straight up, why would I watch black and white movies? Or some of them won't watch. Like, I watch a lot of older like 80s, anime, and they're like, why would I watch that? And again, it's because it's the newest, latest, coolest looking thing is simulcast. Unless that's your bag, is to go back to 80s. I think there's a certain look to that stuff as well that is both nostalgia, but it has the grittier analog feel is something I enjoy. But I don't disparage somebody, but I think especially if you're a creator, I'm going to go back to it's always good if you can have more of a palette,
Yes.
and more of a, just more tricks in your bag. The more media you consume, that's not your immediate, I just like this. The further you go back and the more you look at things, the more you can put that into your bag of tricks and into where you can draw from, because nothing's truly new, but it can seem new to people who don't know that this isn't new. And I think and just looking at technique, like how they do certain things. But kind of dovetailing into that, and I don't want to dominate too much of the conversation, but one thing I thought was really interesting, I'm going to skip forward a little bit with Heart of the Bay is revealing the flashback sequence.
Yes.
But one thing that's fat, and he does it in this pool, and it's got this cool smoke. But one thing that's great is when we see flashback sequences, you might see a flashback sequence in a newer movie that looks what we think maybe 80s, or we may see like a 8mm kind of flashback, and it's cranked a certain way. Whereas in the 30s, his flashback sequence has the air of silent movie.
Yes, it does.
It's undercranked for lots of time, so it's got that sped up.
Yeah, I love that.
Action is, but it's great because to a 30s audience and to a 30s filmmaker, the flashbackiness of film is silent film.
Yeah. Sure.
And I found that I was never going to pick up that, I think, as a kid, right? It looks different. It looks strange. It's got that sped up feel.
I never would have picked up that in the past, and I'm so glad you articulated that, because I wasn't able to put my finger on it.
Yeah, we both commented on how cool it was,
but Tony's nailed it. It's to give that subtle thing to a 30s audience of antiquity, even if it's not the same antiquity,
right?
But it's like, this
but it's
is
the language of film. So their language of film that seems so like, but we don't do silent film anymore. But the way that it's undercranked in parts, and how it's staged, even you could put those silent movie cards in between sequences, and it was even further that. Of course, they didn't want that because they wanted it to be kind of otherworldly. He's evoking magic to show her, and it's kind of dreamlike. But I thought that part blew me away. That's the first time I really noticed that choice, and I was just like, that's because filmmakers do that all the time to show you, this is in the past, we're going to soft focus it, or we're going to maybe we'll make it black and white,
or do the do.
I mean, even in the beginning of I was just catching up on Fargo, there's a part in season 2 where it's got a black and white film thing, and that evokes something. But I just seeing that and knowing that language of film was like, that's why that's so amazing. It just really hit, and I thought it was beautiful.
Thank you for talking about that. I think that was a perfectly good place to jump to that flashback, because we're talking about Ardith Bay. God, that is amazing. So yes, he is. But basically, the movie settles into this plot, which is just again very, very similar to Dracula. Ardith Bay moves in and out of the lives of our friends, the British, and they are mad, by the way, about some political business of how how did this work? They made the discovery, but the Egyptian Museum gets to keep everything.
So he says, the mummy says, we Egyptians are not allowed to open our own people's tombs or whatever, something to that effect. And so
which is a reference to a law which might or might not be real, but it's introducing this sort of political
So then
stuff.
he's like, so then you guys should do it, but then we should, I guess, get...
They can't
later.
Yeah.
The Brits are mad because they can't carry all this cool stuff back to
they can't steal it like they normally. Like, we're so used to taking things from this country.
They haven't quite figured out how they're going to steal it.
Although the older character, and I can't remember his name right now, says something to the effect of, we're not here to loot. We're here to get medals or something like that.
I love that he used the word loot. He did. He used the word loot. I was like, is there an older sense of that word where it's not as... Because it feels very colloquial, but...
No, I mean, he's, and that's... We look at things now and go, oh, man. I mean, even being, having an interest in, like, Egyptology when I was younger, now you look at it and go, holy crap, we just like they
Yes.
just want to steal everything.
Oh yeah.
And take it somewhere else. And hey, sorry that's your dead, but isn't it cool looking? Isn't it neat? And
it's this idea that, and this is really troubling to put into words, but it's this idea that the British Empire is the seat of civilization, and so really all that stuff is better in the hands of smart guys in Britain who can like write papers and advance science and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why I've contended, just to take it as Dave and I usually and Mary say, down a sort of a wormhole. That's why I've always thought that would be an interesting alternate version of the Hammer mummy film would be where the Egyptian who brings the mummy to England to wreak revenge is seen as a protagonist, seen as a hero. It's the English that are the villains, and that they're justifiably wreaking revenge for their culture being looted. It'd be an interesting take.
Well, can I take that even one step further? You talk about the imperialist or colonialist aspects of it and appropriation, and you literally have people taking mummies, bodies. We've all seen them in museums here. From their sacred ground and taking them to another country. But it goes even farther. I mean, there was a very highly prized artist's pigment in the...
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's just ground up. Hey, we're going to make paint from these ground up mummies. You guys are cool with that, right? Sorry about your dead, but...
Which, from what I understand, once they had trouble procuring the real thing in Alexandria or wherever, that presumably, anything would do. Somebody back in England is grinding, whatever components they could to create mummy brown. But the whole idea that they literally would have used that is just, that's like the height of arrogance. And of colonialism, when you literally are using the bodies of these people for your quote unquote art.
I mean, there's another great movie, like somebody who's painted something that comes back to life through that mummy brown. That would be scary.
Well, first of all, that concept I
the Dark Universe mummy did try to dabble in the idea that the mummy actually was in the right, but they just didn't go far enough with it because it also had to be a Tom Cruise movie.
Sure.
And I find that unfortunate, because I think there, like y'all are saying, there is something there. Imhotep is a much more sympathetic character than maybe not as much as Frankenstein's monster, but as much as this borrows from Dracula, the Bela Lugosi Dracula. It's funny because like you have later Dracula movies who do try to do Dracula as a sympathetic character. Universal really wasn't that interested in that. Dracula is elegant and he's stately, but he's not really sympathetic.
Well, you say that it borrows from Dracula, but I think it borrows more from the later Draculas where it's a star-crossed lovers thing. But that wasn't part of the Lugosi.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
This movie,
because Rain said that too, and I was like, no, you're talking about later Dracula. That's definitely not the book at all.
Yeah, but I'm saying that this film borrows its structure from the Todd Browning Dracula movie.
Mm-hmm.
But Imhotep is a sympathetic character, whereas Count Dracula is not.
Right.
Count Dracula, like I said, Count Dracula is elegant, but he's not sympathetic.
Well, also, Imhotep is sympathetic up to the point where he's going to use dark magic to, kill animals, replace somebody's soul, and cause everybody else heart attacks and death with his, Darth Vader powers. Like he's sympathetic in that it was a lost love.
Well, sure, but I mean that's all the Universal monsters. They're sympathetic, but they're also destructive.
In the end, they're destructive. Yeah.
Like it is hard. I mean, come on, it's hard to have sympathy for somebody who's like, look, I know I couldn't make it at the time, and I was put to death for loving this princess.
I disagree with you on this one.
So you're willing to kill everybody?
I'm not willing. I'm not willing. You can
anybody who's what you're saying. Listen,
for crying out loud.
Imhotep. Anybody who gets in Imhotep's way is primed for death.
We've said the same thing Scott Chesebrough for years.
So
you
Drew,
can empathize. You can empathize with somebody's plight and still disagree with how they go about their ways. Like I think, like Larry Talbot is a sympathetic character. He is also murderous. The creature from the Black Lagoon is a sympathetic character. He is also murderous. Frankenstein's monster character is a sympathetic character. He's also murderous. The only one that is completely all in with Team Evil is basically Dracula.
That's true.
Even I guess the Invisible Man, I guess, but like it's not really.
Here's the difference.
Like,
okay.
The creature, Frankenstein's monster, and the werewolf all are animalistic in the way, or are not. Ardith Bay knows exactly what he's doing when he looks into a pool and gives somebody a heart attack.
Yes.
I'm not saying that I am not saying that what he is doing is morally okay.
No,
I'm saying that I'm saying that it is that he is more sympathetic than fucking Dracula.
No,
I got you, but I'm talking the flip side of the coin, because I have less. Again, villains and real life dictators do anything they want to do to get their way.
Right.
So when we see a person who's a sociopath, now granted, this is a star-crossed lovers thing, and it is more close to other Draculas. I agree that he is sympathetic at the outset, but at some point in time, our Ardith Bay has decided black magic is the best way to kill anyone who prevents me from getting what I want. And if you knew somebody who said, I love this woman, I'm willing to kill anyone who also loves her, that would not be sympathetic.
This is also abstract because we're talking about fiction. But if somebody was actually doing, well, first of all, if somebody's actually doing this, they can do black magic and mind blown. And they're a mummy to boot. So like double mind blown. I'm saying on an abstract level, like I love my wife. I would do anything for my wife. Sure. I adore her. I worship the ground that she walks on. If I was somehow, thrust thousands of years beyond my time and I found her reincarnated, I might lose my mind and lose myself a little bit trying to get her back. While that would still put me in the wrong, I do understand, having loved very deeply in my life, where this guy is coming from. Even though, yes, ethically, what he is doing is
That's what
wrong.
I'm saying. That's all I'm trying to say, is I want to make sure that we're correct. So, Drew, you are saying that you would probably, if you were separated from the one you love across time,
oh my God,
you would kill anybody. And that's fine.
Okay,
I'm just trying to figure out where to stand.
And move on.
Sure, Tony. If I ever become a mummy,
that's all I'm asking.
I just want to point out,
because I don't want to get in the way.
Characters.
Well, you'll be dead because it'll be thousands of years into the future. So, good thing that's not going to be your problem.
I just want to point out that
because I'll be space mummy.
Space mummy. Actually, that should happen. You need a mummy.
Okay. Before you get too off topic.
Mummy X. Yes. No, but the look, like characters like Kane, Charles Foster Kane, or I don't know, Stefano de Mira from Days of Our Lives, or stuff like that. Always these bigger than life bad guys, Doctor Doom. And if you ask them, though, they always will give you their sob story, and that's but that's how they become.
What I'm getting at. But like I said,
all I'm saying is you can do it, like you can empathize with a character and still not agree what you're doing, and that's fine. Like it's a mental exercise. It's like I can understand this guy's pathos. He is a villain, and I'm not trying to say he's a hero. He's not. Right. He's a villain, but he's a tragic villain, which is kind of Universal's stock and trade.
Of course.
Like that's what
Remember
they do.
also that villains always think they are the hero of their own story.
Right.
And Imhotep totally does.
Absolutely.
And Imhotep was probably a bad dude to begin with. Just so we understand, back in Egypt, he's clearly like, he's lusting after this like princess who's out of his league and 30 years younger than him. And he's going to stalk her down through the centuries. I'm
not sure in this movie as well. I'm not sure he's less stalkier than the quote unquote hero who basically is like, hey, I'm sorry that you're out cold and you were bewitched. But so like come back to my place. He's pretty crappy about that.
And I don't mean to knot this thing all up, but I have to jump to Imhotep's defense
jump anywhere
to a little degree, in that when they're showing, what led up to his being buried alive, and she's failing, she's laying on a dais and she's dying. Mm-hmm. She doesn't seem repelled by him. If anything, she seems to be happy to see him, and so I'm not sure that he's
you're right.
Your premise about him stalking her is true.
You're right. I apologize. That was a sleight of hand. You're right. It might be a really friendly May December romance that she was happy to be in.
No, I think
I don't know.
In the flashback, the tragedy of their meeting, and because there's not a problem really, like it's not a hey, you can't date my daughter kind of thing. They're in love. All of this, the part that gets him put to death is when he's going to use black magic.
No, that's a good point.
Magic
to kill
resurrect her.
To kill the person who is currently using that body, because that's the idea. Is
I'm talking about in the flashback.
No, we're talking
what damns him
correct.
is the magic part. Not that they were lovers. That would
true.
be in other ones where you can't love the princess, etc. And so that becomes a tragedy.
Right.
Okay, I accept you.
Yes, correct.
He's
He's using magic back then. It doesn't work. He's now using the magic will result in the death of the person currently inhabiting the body that his lover wants to have.
He gives up, by the way, pretty quickly on the notion of bringing back his deceased lover, moving a consciousness into it or whatever. He's like, whoa. We got this new 1930s girl wearing her weird bikini.
Why would you want to be with a like? I mean, I know he's a mummy, but he's not looking that great.
No. He wants to make her into him. He wants to make her into what he is. So that's why he wants to kill the current person, so that he can then they can both be mummies. Because otherwise, she's going to age and become die.
Yes,
but he burns the old mummy. I find it fascinating that he's not like.
Well, that's
he
part
could
of
have been like.
He knows that there's no bringing her back, because the soul has, unlike his soul, which stayed with his body. Her soul went on to.
This is all arbitrary plot stuff. I mean,
I think it's necessary, because otherwise you can't.
I agree. I'm with you.
Movie can happen.
Is how, like, as much as the Stephen Summers version of this is removed from how like dramatic and gothic and tragic this is, they kept all of this stuff that we're just talking about. Mm-hmm. Like they kept that mythology, and they're pretty beholden to it, which I think is interesting, because they totally didn't have to, because I bet you a lot of people when that movie came out had not seen this version.
I have no memory of what happened in The Mummy, the 1999 Mummy. So it's shocking. I mean, I'm sure I saw it, but it's shocking to me what you're telling me, that this stuff.
One of these days, we kicked this idea back around a few years ago, and I still think it's a good idea for a retrospective. One of these days, we should go back and do all of the classic monster remakes that came out in the 90s, because I think that would be a fun retro. But
it could. You can hear the skepticism in my voice, right?
Well, because you don't want to do anything past 1982. So like that's always going to be a fight. But if you're outvoted, Jason, you're outvoted.
Right? No, absolutely.
Well, and of course the 59 Hammer version is the same basic theme, in that the failing of this plot is that this one woman looks like Prince Ananka or something like that. So
Yeah, I go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think all the stuff with the scroll, and it has kind of nebulous powers that it gives him. They never really, but we know he can make, heart attacks. We know he's maybe stronger than it would seem when he needs to be. Mm-hmm. And he can control at least her mind. And then it's any servant who seems to be in the line of servants that he had once. All of that stuff is really great. And I'm surprised, we get a lot of Dracula's powers and what he could control and turn into a bat and turn into a wolf and all that. But I don't think enough of the mummies past this have really delved into that, because all of that stuff is really cool.
Most of the mummies that come after this are basically just zombies.
Yeah, right. What you said, juggernauts, right? Where they're they're sort of set free. They're going to go grab some flowers or whatever it is that they need to collect.
Yep.
And now I'm thinking mainly of the Mummy and Tales from the Dark Side. Which,
the mummy, it's funny. I watched a lot of the, about a year or so back, I watched all of the Universal mummy movies as they went on. And the funny thing is like the further along they go, they very much remind me of Friday the 13th movies. And right. The mummy character is fundamentally just basically a black and white version of Jason. Right. Not Henderson.
Yeah, right. I'm with you.
If you can ever, I don't know if it's still around, but I got the Universal Blu-ray box set on sale. It periodically comes on sale, and whenever, if you don't have that, it is amazing. I had some of the Blu-ray, the original DVD collections when I was working on that Universal Kid Monsters game that Jason and I worked on. Jason doing the script and I was an animator. And so I had some of those, and those were cool. But if you are listening and you come across that set and it's on sale again.
So this is a Blu-ray set that has what, like all the monsters or?
Yeah, so it'll have like a Dracula case that has, several Dracula Blu-rays. Mummy has several Mummy Blu-rays, and they have commentaries and, extras, and
sounds great.
But it's basically just a universal box of each one. It's really fantastic.
Wow.
I'm kind of surprised they don't own it, to be honest. I've got a basic collection which has each one of the originals, the first of each, and some really nice commentary, but nothing beyond that. And so
now the DVDs they had at the time were really cool because they had kind of this greenish hue, and they had a window that pulled apart like a slipcase, and those are really great. I mean, I think we got some of those from Universal, and because we were working on the game, and so those are pretty amazing. And then I
have those except for the Mummy one. I have the Dracula, Frankenstein, and Wolfman box set that you're talking about there.
Yeah, but
so great. Yeah,
there's a Blu-ray set, and I mean it's usually kind of expensive, but it goes on sale.
$150.
Yeah,
good grief.
Well,
good God. Well,
I don't know if that's out of print prices, but I know I got it. It would go in waves where it would go on sale, and that's when I picked it up, and it's quite there's a lot of material there. And the transfers are great. They restored a lot of it, like the Dracula set that has the Spanish version looks amazing. It's really good. The extras on it are great. So yeah, if you get the Mummy one, I'm still coming through that after this weekend and watching the first one.
Oh,
that's a great idea. I find it fascinating that once the plot does settle into running back and forth, trying to Imhotep very clearly needs to sacrifice the girl so she can be resurrected as one of him, and this whole process. And in the end, he is destroyed in a supernatural fashion that is very rare. I mean, it's really interesting to me that because of the sacrilege, the Egyptian gods destroy him. Which is so different. Like in Scars of Dracula, when Dracula himself gets struck by lightning. That's very rare. Normally, your heroes are the ones who do away.
Well, I also find it's really great because there's a mirror to what happens in his original when he's originally sentenced to death. You see the statue move, etc.
That's right.
Yes.
So there's a mirror to that. Like you can't escape this fate. One thing I also love is that, the older gentleman at some point realized, look, the stuff he has in that scroll, we can't contend with that. Like we are pitiful creatures. comparatively. Like we have to get smart about this. This isn't, especially after our hero gets attacked, like heart attacked.
Yes.
Across town.
Yep.
Yeah.
But even before that, they're going, hey, we really need to think about a strategy, because there's no way that we can 3,700 years worth of time that we're gonna even remotely be competent enough to counteract this. And I think that's great. And the younger guy's headstrong. No, love will win. Or at least maybe lust, depending on how you think about it. And
I really don't believe for a second that they had a love that would cross the ages, like you said. I think David was trying to say something, though.
No, I mean the lust between the hero and because he's so pushy all the time.
Can I remark on him, because he was also Harker in the Browning Dracula? I think he is so much better in this movie than he is in Dracula. Like he's much more like, not that he's the most interesting character in the movie. He's clearly not, but he's much more involving than the version of Jonathan Harker in Dracula.
Well, again, I think he has. To me, again, watching a bunch of them, he's got a action serial. He's very much like a hero in a serial. He's got I'm gonna go and I think. I wonder now, after watching this and thinking about it, going through this podcast, if Brendan Fraser's character is not a little bit of that. He's definitely channeling Indiana Jones and such like that. Sure. But when you look at his kind of erstwhile, even though he's pretty pushy, he's got an erstwhile nature, and he's charming. And if you're gonna key off of that, I didn't notice before really thinking about it how much he seems to be keying off of this character until now I'm going through like, I could totally. And I mean that would be the direction you were given somebody. Well, it's the
hero. Jason, we should let David. We should let David say something, because he's been trying to get a word in edgewise. Poor guy.
I would just my most recent thought, rather ridiculously, was that the character could practically be dressed in the uniform of a Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
You move him from serial to serial or movie to movie. He's a sort of stock character, but I enjoy his performance. I find him a little annoying sometimes, but that's okay.
Isn't it strange how they treat women in these movies like 9-year-olds? It is super odd to me.
They can't protect themselves, in the way they give in almost always.
You drug them so they fall asleep, and then you talk about like what you're going to do next to protect them. I mean, it's odd, and I know that just sounds false for me to pretend that this is not familiar, because it's in all of these movies. But it is just really strange to see it, how they treat these adult women in movies like this, like 9-year-olds that they have to order around.
It's like a carryover from the whole Victorian idea of women being able to protect themselves.
Yeah.
The colonial era, America's colonial area would have had no time for that bullshit, because it's busy doing everything. By the 19th century, practically, not straight up everything. And so you see that carried over into a lot of these movies, I think.
Yes.
But the thing I was saying about the love across the ages, I am talking about the young guy, because that's what the other guy says at the end. He's like, you can get her back because she, if your love can reach across the ages. And I was they don't have anything, and they haven't built any kind of relationship that would be that powerful.
Isn't that funny?
That's what Rain picked up on that as well. Although it is kind of a shame, because when she's first introduced, she has like a fair amount of agency where she's like, I can't believe I'm here. And there's some depth. But once Imhotep is trying, takes over her, a lot of that kind of goes away, even to the fact that, our intrepid adventurer hero goes, no, we should really make out. She's like, she starts to resist. And she's like, well, but do we? Because, I fainted and I was in, it kind of seemed like you're taking advantage of me. And he's like, nah, babe, it's cool though.
Right? Now you're going into your John Travolta.
That's so funny. That's true.
It's true.
That's the point where I was like, no, but she was so interesting as, this women in elite society who's kind of bored with it all and
Yes.
has her own stuff going on, and then for it to turn into no, let me take over and I'll do what's best for you. Is that
Well, you know what's really even doubly ironic about that, and some of you all probably already know this. I just learned a lot of it over the last couple of days, having watched the movie, listening to then some of the supplementary material, and then sort of doing a little deep dive on the internet. But that actress who played her was apparently just an amazing individual in her own right. And Julia,
Really?
you had mentioned the fact that she did not get along with Karl Freund, which I think is probably even an
What does that mean? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I don't understand. I haven't heard anything about that.
I mean, he was very bullish in his own way. And at one point, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't to sort of assert his dominance over the actress, he said, well, we're going to need you to play this scene a nude from the waist up, thinking
that one is not verified necessarily, because in the story she says, oh, sure, I'll do it as long as the censor's okay with it. But apparently the Hays Code wasn't being enforced yet. So that one may or may not be true. But apparently he would have her stand up for 2 hours against a board so she wouldn't wrinkle her dress. And he was just like super obnoxious.
That's awful.
He also had because this was his first film that he actually directed. He was famously known as a cinematographer and was actually a very innovative cinematographer, but he wanted to make sure that this came in on time, if not early and before budget or under budget. And he worked them like dogs to the point where there was supposedly some days where they worked 24 hours straight.
Pretty much everybody was subject to his wrath if things didn't work out. I don't know.
Well, another thing that she was upset about, though, is that she actually very much believed in reincarnation, and that's the reason why she wanted to do this project. Yeah. And they actually filmed whole sequences of her character going throughout history and being reincarnated.
And then
I
heard about that.
People, and then they cut it. Yeah.
There's also a story that says that he put her in an arena with lions while he and the crew were protected inside cages. And then they cut that scene as well.
Wow.
Good grief.
What a jerk.
That's always distressing to hear about that and go, like these directors, still today, but like Hitchcock and everybody just treating actors really poorly. And
she apparently at one point, and I'm probably misquoting her, but she supposedly said something along the lines of that she had more respect for the whores on 42nd Street than she did for anyone even. And she also claimed to have levitated, but something about the coming down was disastrous. So.
She seems to have been a really interesting person, because I'm looking now at her biography, and she was married to John Houseman. He's the guy who produced The War of the Worlds, the radio show. Well, and he's John Houseman. I mean,
exactly. And then he's in Ghost Story towards the end there. I mean,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But she was married to John Houseman from 1929 to 1933.
Okay.
And she was a director. She directed Don Juan in Hell, and so apparently a really interesting person. So
it's really kind of cool to see her in the in the costume and the dress. We're first introduced to her. I mean, my wife and I were watching this together. We thought, "Whoa, that's definitely pre Hays Code."
Yeah.
I told Jason when she's standing there, and it's clear that you can probably see her boob, and I'm like, she's probably like, your boob's showing there a little bit. Yeah, but the clothing is amazing in this.
It really is. Yeah, there's so much about the style of this movie. Everybody's already mentioned it, but I keep coming back to just the look of it. It's absolutely sumptuous, and all of its. This to me is like the definition of silver screen, sort of magic.
Mm-hmm. Art of the Bay rocks some amazing, Egyptian wizard robe stuff too.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Really,
I can't believe you haven't talked about his name.
What about it?
That it's an anagram?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh really? What is it?
It's
for
Death
what?
by Raw.
Death by Raw.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I never. I didn't.
I thought everybody. Is it wrong that I just assumed everybody knew that?
Well, it still needs to be said.
I don't know
apparently.
about wrong, but certainly I'm too dense to know that. And it would have been helpful to have David Manners write the name on a mirror and then start moving the little letters around and stuff. It's tougher than Alucard. I'll say that. You know,
I mean, if you were going to do it, what you'd probably want to do is write it in hieroglyphs and then rearrange them in a certain way and go, oh, it's like in the... At least you could do it definitely more elegantly than a mirror.
Than Alucard.
So yes. That's awesome.
Red Rum is actually excellently done, I have to say.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
that's really cool. I had no idea. Yeah. So, and the movie's not very long, by the way, just so we understand.
Yeah, I think
especially, I guess, since they cut out all that
longer than the film
reincarnation
is.
stuff. Right. The film is 73 minutes long.
Yeah, we always manage to talk longer than the film is when it's a
I
short.
was just making a comment a short time ago.
Well, because we're going through the plot, but plus we're also talking about a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, which inevitably is going to take up more time.
Hey,
Right.
that's what we're here for. That we love that stuff.
Yeah.
We should probably get our final thoughts. I think we've touched on just about everything, but this is a good opportunity for you to bring up anything that maybe we didn't mention along the way, especially if somebody's listening and they're like, as soon as I listen to this, and then I'm going to go watch it or whatever. So, same order. We'll get our final thoughts, so we'll come back around for endorsements, and I'd love to hear what our special guests have to endorse for us this week. Okay, so it was Drew, Julia, Scott, Tony, David, and then me. So Drew, final thoughts.
Well, I mean, this was every bit the epic conversation that it deserves to be, and now I guess I should be. It's important that now everybody knows the fear that when I am resurrected as a mummy, that I am coming for all of you, especially Tony first.
We are wheat for the scythe. If
Yes.
you stand in between reincarnated Drew and reincarnated Jamie, tough luck.
Ours is a love that will stand the up against the sands of time, Tony. Okay.
I'm not saying I would stand between you. I'm just saying I want to know the parameters. That's it.
The parameters is fear my mummy powers.
Fear my mummy powers.
No, this is a great movie. I'm glad that we finally got around to it. I love that we're doing so many classic horror films during the Halloween season, because these are the kinds of movies that I like to watch this time of year. And again, how is it that we have not done that many mummy movies? Like I feel like we should almost do like a I Want My Mummy retrospective.
That's a fun idea.
Oh my gosh! Only if we can do the Doctor Who episode, because that is so.
Ooh, I love.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Okay.
Are you my mummy?
Oh, wait. For me though, it's the Tom Baker one. So I guess maybe I'm.
I thought that was talking about.
I don't know the Tom Baker because I didn't watch the original Who.
Julia is making a pun.
See,
Taking a long way to make a Doctor Who pun. Yes.
Yeah.
No, but
You're talking about the
it's
faceless
literally
child.
yes, but that's literally what he says. I want my mummy. Are you my mummy? He says that all the time.
That's true.
Or is the retrospective Mummy Dearest?
Oh,
I like that.
Maybe we can do this around Mummers Day. Anyway, great to do this.
I'm down with that.
Great, of course, to do this with our friends from the Monster Movie Happy Hour.
Happy to be here.
it's a pleasure.
Thank
I'm sorry
you.
that you guys couldn't get a word in edgewise. I know that we just have a tendency to just barrel forward like crazy
Believe
people.
me,
So.
you do so at your own risk, because we can talk in a long time. So
I spent last night editing a 3-hour recording down to an hour and 20 minutes. So what does that tell you?
that you edit yours more than we do, because we just leave ours at 3 hours.
That's for darn sure. Yes, right.
True.
So true. All right. Continue, Drew. I'm sorry.
Just that I enjoyed this conversation. This was fun.
Very
I'm
cool.
glad that we finally done this movie.
Wonderful. Julia, do you have any other?
Yeah. We didn't really talk that much about the colonialism and the slavery, aside from just addressing that it exists. That the poor guy, the poor servant is sacrificed for, several needs that other people have. But so that sucks. But it's definitely representative of the time that it was made in. But no, I thought, like I said, I think I've said everything that I just thought it was really neat, and some neat characters. I don't really have anything else.
Fabulous. Scott, final thoughts.
well, other than I guess most everything that I would have said has been said to some degree or another. But what I would say is, not that there's a lot of nuance to his portrayal, but this movie more or less reinforced my feeling that, Karloff is, because of the genre most of his films are in, is completely underrated as an actor.
Mm.
And I think that, there are other movies that I would pick for his job in a film, but I think that, this film just showed him to be a strong actor, I think. So
yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And again, thanks to our Monster Movie Happy Hour guest. This is really awesome. I hope we can do this more often. It's always just such a pleasure to have everyone on. Hopefully we can get everybody on next time. It's but it's always a blast.
Always happy to talk about monster movies.
Yeah.
Or horror movies. So.
Yeah.
Do you
really enjoy it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. It's actually your time, and then I have a question for the guys. But go ahead, Tony. Yeah. Sorry.
I really enjoy. There's so much atmosphere to this. I love how imposing Karloff is throughout. His presence on set carries so much weight. There's just a gravity to it. And when he's performing all of his rituals, none of them come across as hokey. They feel like I'm invoking this power from across, from through space, through time. And it works really well. It doesn't always work great like that, but in this it's really effective. The costuming is just so evocative. I think we mentioned the great costumes our lead wears, all of her awesome dresses. I think the most, although her high society dress at the beginning, I think is some of the coolest costuming. It definitely has that, we're saying the silver screen aspect of the time, this elegance that kind of that's part of what made people into movie fans and into, I want to find out, eventually led to gossip rags and stuff like that. But a lot of movies like this and that high society feel that they're evoking is what made people want to watch movie stars, and really plays into that. The fact it's in this horror movie is even better. I really enjoy it. Like I said, I think a lot of people might see this as a slower movie, and you might get more bang for your buck watching some of those sequels. I think most people still remember those, but I think if you've made it this far, do yourself a favor and sit through it and really just kind of bathe in all of those great moments that are in this film that deserve to be seen, because there's a lot to unpack if you're willing to go through it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That I feel really inspired by your talk there. Yeah, you're right. That was beautiful. And by the way, yes, that high society dress, if people Google Zita Johann, the mummy, you got a lot of the Egyptian dresses, but her society dress with her cool little 30s hat and everything, and it's a double-breasted dress with these mother of pearl pieces that run down the side. It's an amazing dress. David, what are your thoughts?
I just want to borrow everything that Tony said and put my stamp on it. You articulated much of what was on my mind.
Thanks.
Watching movies like this, in particular movies that deal with characters who are part of that British colonial era that experience in, say, Egypt or what have you, in spite of everything I know about the horrors, the real life horrors of what imperialism and colonialism did. And of course we're all still dealing with it. I mean, it's echoing down, now through the ages, unfortunately. But there's a part of me that wants to be dressed in a nice vest, and have a glass of port, and I don't even smoke, but I suddenly want a pipe, and I want to sit with my friends, just like I'm doing now, with you folks, and I want us to sit around in this parlor and talk about the exotic things we've seen and done, and look at old and I'm totally oblivious to the cost, of course, that the rest of the world pays for it. Does that make sense? It evokes
it does to me.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there's, so I will always enjoy watching these movies that have, sequences like that, in spite of, my understanding of the reality of that. I mean, in the end, it's all still fantasy, you know. I mean, even a historical movie is still really just a work of fiction with historical trappings. So this movie works for me on multiple levels. It satisfies that fascination I have with a historical past, even highly fictionalized as it often is. And of course, there's the macabre. You know, there's the black magic, and then the artistry, the sheer artistry involved. And I appreciate sets in movies where you see I mean, in many cases, it's literally in most cases being shot on a soundstage. They don't want to have to build the upper half of the set, so everything in the corners and above falls away into shadow. But to me, that's where the magic happens, you know.
Yeah.
And so this movie just bang, bang, bang all the way down the line fulfills every one of those needs and desires. So please, folks, if you haven't seen it, just do yourself a favor and watch it. And just enjoy it for what it is and for the time in which it's made, and be thankful that it was, because it obviously spawned so many different movies that we all, for the most part, have come to love.
That's wonderful. I would add absolutely nothing to that, other than for the Monster Movie Happy Hour guys. I'm thankful that I've been really enjoying your show since you came into being, and I'm glad that one of your stops in your anniversary tour of sorts has been to hang out with us and discuss a monster.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we've always loved you guys, and we were listening to you long before we were a podcast.
Aw.
Yeah. So.
Oh, well, awesome.
It's nice to know that there was somebody.
You are largely an inspiration for. but it's true. The tone of your conversations, your obvious affection for one another. There's nothing snarky about the way you talk about movies. Or if there is something, it's probably very well deserved. And so Scott and myself, and obviously our dear Mary, who, as we said, couldn't join us tonight, unfortunately, we all just automatically fell in love with your podcast, and we're just so thankful to be here tonight.
Good.
That's very sweet. Thank you for joining us.
All right, let's do endorsements. Let's find out what people are excited to share with us and with one another and with the world. Drew, do you have anything that you want to turn people's attention to?
Well, first off, because I have a lot of personal stuff I'm pushing this month, which I will go into in a moment. But I want to direct people's attention to a movie that just came out. It's available on demand and on Amazon Prime. It's a werewolf movie of sorts, which is, of course, a genre that is near and dear to my heart. And this is a movie called The Wolf of Snow Creek. And it's tonally kind of like if the Coen brothers directed The Howling. Like it's
I'm down.
Don't go into it expecting a typical werewolf movie. It's not. But although it delivers on most of what you would want from a werewolf movie while still being full of twists and turns. And it follows this small mountain town in Utah that has what appears to be a series of werewolf attacks. And they're the deputy and the sheriff, who are both father and son, and the sheriff is played by the late great Robert Forster. This is actually his last filmed appearance. But the main character is his son, who is the deputy, and he is an alcoholic with anger management issues. So it kind of follows his spiral as he fails to solve these killings as they go along.
That sounds fabulous.
It's very well done. Jamie and I watched it last weekend, and I've been looking forward to it ever since I saw the first trailer. And it did not disappoint while still also being a surprising movie. It kept me on my toes a little bit. And for that, I am thankful. But it's a cool movie. And again, it's a new movie in a time where new movies are scarce. So please, check that out and support new horror and, quirky horror at that. go on Amazon Prime, go the on demand, go the Fandango, and you can watch it from the safety of your own home. On a non-personal level, I have a lot going on with Halloween Man this month. It's the 20th anniversary of Halloween Man. Our issue 25, the 20th anniversary issue, just came out. It's gotten really good reviews so far from critics. I've done a lot of press for it. And then now, and appropriately enough, in another week or so, on October 28th, we have an annual issue coming out called Halloween Man versus the Mummy. So you can continue.
Nice.
You can continue.
What do you know?
Yeah. You can continue your mummy love just a little bit longer with that one, and I'm looking forward to getting to share that one with everybody. And if you're looking for some socially distant spooky season fun to do, on October 30th there is going to be a Zoom panel with myself and several other people involved with both of those projects, hosted by our esteemed Jason Henderson here.
Yes.
And I will be posting a link to that on our Facebook group tomorrow, so you can get all the information. But I am really, really excited that Nicola Scott, the comic book industry rock star that she she did our beautiful cover for our 20th anniversary issue. She has a long history with Halloween Man, and she's going to take a part in this panel. So if you're a DC fan, or you're a fan of her Image Comics work, even if you're like indifferent to me, use this as an opportunity to chat with her, because she's awesome. So, all lots of cool Halloween stuff coming up for Halloween Man. I'm really excited.
Wonderful. That was fantastic. Julia, what about you?
So I know that Drew has a different opinion, but we really enjoyed The Haunting of Bly Manor. I thought it was creepy and spooky.
I
it's
won't
not
guess your yum.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I thought that was really there was some really neat atmospheric stuff, a few good twists and surprises. It's not. I don't think it's going to win any Emmys. Maybe it will. I don't know. But but it was fun to watch. And then today I watched the West Wing special, which is Hartsfield Landing staged at the Orpheum Theater. Is that what it's called? The Orpheum Theater? Yeah, and it's Aaron Sorkin insisted it's not a reunion, because he says that a reunion evokes images of a very Brady Christmas, and he did not want to do that. So it is a special that has all the same people that were in the original episode, with the exception, of course, of the late John Spencer, and Sterling K. Brown takes the part of Leo McGarry. So, but it was really great, and I loved it so much. And they had this beautiful, the theme song is played live by these, this I'm gonna be embarrassed because I can't remember who the guitarist was, but I should probably look that up. But but it's like this beautiful string section, and then they have every commercial break they have a celebrity talk about, but it's not really a commercial break, but where their commercial breaks would be, they have a celebrity talking about why you should vote. So you got start with Michelle Obama and all these different people, but it's just, the whole thing is just to get out the vote, and it's just really neat. So it's on HBO Max, so if you don't have that and you want to get a trial, this is a good thing to watch on your HBO Max trial.
Very good. Excellent. Scott, do you have anything to endorse for us?
Well, I got this hardcover book, which is, I know it appears backwards to you, which is called The Art of Pulp Horror. And it's a brand new book, but and it's not part of a set, although that being said, there are about 3 previous volumes that have been done for about the past 10 years. And it's a very nice book. With all sorts of artwork from both film and popular culture. And it's all nice, really nice, glossy pages.
Oh, I see pages from Creepy and stuff like that. That's really cool.
But also from movies and popular fiction and just about every pop culture venue you can think of. And it just talks about the progression of art and different artists, and it's it's just a really high quality book, and for something that's oversized like this and a heavier book, it's relatively cheap. It's only $40, for something that's all glossy pages. That's relatively inexpensive for something like that. So I highly recommend that. And the editor of that is Stephen Jones, and once again, it's called The Art of Pulp Horror. So if you have a chance to pick it up, I highly, highly recommend it.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It looks beautiful. Real quick, I just want to say that the person who plays the guitar is actually the composer of the piece. It's W.G. Snuffy Walden. So that's pretty cool.
Excellent.
Tony, what about you?
So I'm super duper super late to the game, but I started watching Fargo because it all came out through Hulu, and I've been really enjoying that series. Yeah, when we were discussing going through these films, I see a lot of lists, and I've seen also film critics complaining, hey, all these lists make it look like no horror came out before 1980. And while I think I've seen some people say that super snarkily, and some people go, hey, it would be cool if you picked up something from before Chainsaw Massacre, which of course is before 80, but are the most famous things that have come out since the 2000s. I agree with Drew that I think you can mix that up a lot. I think I got to go check out that werewolf movie for sure, because that sounds great. But also, if it's in your there, we have access to so much stuff. And while again, I'm not telling you like I think anything less of anybody who goes, that's just not my bag, I don't really enjoy these films. I'm gonna say, there's a lot of stuff that you can check out. Some of it we've covered, some of it we still need to cover. Like I like the idea of a whole Mummy retrospective. But I'm really into, we're all stuck at home, it seems like, or most of us are. And there's a lot of stuff on streaming. Maybe do kind of like what I do, start with finding something kind of old that you dig, and then see what your streaming services, if they have the recommended for you section, then just start rummaging through that. And I often dig even deeper, but I've come across really cool stuff through that. Also from this podcast, I'm pretty sure the Tutankhamun book I was thinking about was Tutankhamun: The Untold Story by Thomas Helving, and hopefully I pronounced the last name right. But I've seen some stuff that that's contentious. Oh, I don't know about this, but that's the one I read the most of when I was, and that's the one I'm pretty sure is still at my parents' house. But it has some really cool pictures of them in the tombs and such. And also, although there was a misunderstanding, so Julia was talking about the newer Doctor Who. I'm going to go with Pyramids of Mars from the Tom Baker era, and this was crazily enough not the reason why I wrote the song "Raise the Pyramids" from Deserts of Mars. Although it seems like it should have been, and I should have put two and two together. I'm sure that it lodged deep within my media nerd brain, and I'm sure that had something to do with it. But that song and its name were not intentionally a reference to this particular episode, although maybe it should have been, actually, now that I think about it. But
and here on, you can tell people what it was. I mean, who?
Yeah, well, I'm honest to a fault, so I'm terrible at lying, even when it's It's
but
more.
I mean,
It's
it sounds as though in your
influenced.
mind it was okay. I won't.
It's in my mind. It's a mix of this and the the den sequence from.
Jason is very flexible with facts.
Sure. I want. Is that part of the lawyer part? I don't know.
That's part of the writer thing, because he will tell. I can't tell you how many times. I'm like you, Tony. We'll be telling a story, and I'll be like, I'm trying to remember if it was in September or August, but he will just go, it was 2000. I'll be like, no, it was 2002. I remember because Sophia was already born. He'll be like, oh my God, who cares? It was just let it go. But he just fills in constant details that are not accurate.
I respect that. I'm terrible at. I can spin a yarn, but I'm terrible when it comes to actual wanting it to be factual, because that's the way my brain works. But yes, the actual maybe I should admit that. Oh no, it's totally Tom Baker. Pyramids of Mars. That's what did it. But it actually would be a mix of that and subconsciously that, and then the Den sequence from the heavy metal movie. It's part of it, but it put my own spin. But anyway, Pyramids of Mars and Tutankhamun: The Untold Story are the two things I kind of mentioned in this podcast. That if you have a chance to check them out, they're fun and cool.
Perfect. David, what about you?
Well, a couple different things, if you don't mind. First of all, there was in my youth, and for that matter in Scott's youth, here in the Twin Cities on Saturday nights, a program called Horror Incorporated. And, it had that package of movies, that we all talk about that, sort of repopularized, horror movies in the 60s. And so I no doubt saw The Mummy, the exact movie we're talking about tonight. I would have seen it on Saturday, March 2nd, 1974. I would have seen it in my grandparents' living room while everybody else was asleep. I would have had a bowl of popcorn, and I would have had a glass of Kool-Aid or High C in front of me. And within a few years, I would also have a stack of drawing papers, and I would sketch what I was watching, because in those days, that was the only way to visually remember a movie, because you were never sure you'd ever see it again. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, but the reason I know that it was Saturday, March 2nd, 74, is that there's a website devoted to the Horror Incorporated show. It's called the Horror Incorporated Project. And a guy named Mike Popham does that. We're friends with him on Twitter. And what he has done is he's meticulously gone through like the TV guides and whatnot, the early 70s for the Twin Cities area. And he's retweeted every episode in a blog post for his blog. And so he gives the rundown, essentially the plot, if you will. And then he gives some commentary for every one of these. And it's great fun. So if you happen to have lived in Minnesota or Western Wisconsin in the early 70s, and this was your introduction to horror, check out the Horror Incorporated Project. It's basically on WordPress.
That's a wonderful
the other
tip.
thing is something that we are all involved with, but by that I mean all of us here tonight, is on Halloween. If you happen to be anywhere close to Twitter and have access to streaming services, a lot of us will be part of a marathon starting, I think, at 2:00 Eastern time on Halloween and going until 2:00 the following Sunday.
Yes.
12 movies and 12 movies with 12, if you will, hosts. We are hosting one of them. We're doing, Vampire Circus. You guys are doing
Vampire Lovers.
Yeah. So I just think that
right
I'm going to
after
have to figure out my Twitter login because I don't remember it.
Yeah. Well,
discovered over the last year since creating the podcast, Twitter was sort of our home. Facebook is, can be interesting in its own way, but we've become connected to the Mutant family, which is sort of an outgrowth of the Joe Bob Briggs and Darcy the Mail Girl, the Last Drive-In show. But it's this loose connection of fans, horror fans. And so we've been connected with them for the better part of a year now and done the occasional movie viewing on Friday nights where you have, dozens and dozens, if not more people all tweeting. We're all watching a movie on our own streaming services at the same time. So this is sort of that version of that on steroids. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be really fun. And we made it a point of having our movie butt up against yours. So we're sort of, in a sense, virtually hanging out with you for a couple of hours.
I think it sounds great. It'll be a good time. Yeah.
I think it'll be fun.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to offer.
That's really wonderful. For me, I would mention, they're hard to get your hands on, but if you Google those Crestwood House movie monster books that I mentioned, I mentioned Ian Thorne had the one about the mummy. But if you go looking on Google, you'll find all kinds of pictures from that book series, and they were so fun. They were really cool. So that's a fun Google wormhole to go down. Also, Julia and I caught the Goonies at the drive-in, and that was, what a great experience that was. So, during COVID times, a lot of drive-ins are running. A lot of them are pop-ups. Your Rotary Club, in this case here in Littleton, or whoever is doing it. Go out to the drive-in and see something, because it is a blast. And can't say enough. It was a blast.
Before you hop off, Jason, I want to mention, we forgot to mention the gorgeous poster for the mummy. I'm just looking at it right now, and it's so pretty.
Good. So
It's
good.
so pretty. So yeah, take a look at if you're on Facebook, Castle of Horror podcast, we Jason shared it or somebody. It's really neat.
I think Drew did, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it is beautiful. So that brings us to the end of our discussion, our mega discussion of The Mummy. Happy anniversary to the Monster Movie Happy Hour. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, y'all.
Thank you.
And we'll see you.
Yeah.
We'll see you for the Halloween Twitter event and on Facebook. Listeners, if you wanna engage with us about anything we might have missed in discussing The Mummy or what have you, just leave a note and we will totally respond. And and you can start a big conversation on the page, and we'll drop in and engage with that. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.